So I'm so happy that you're here and able to join us on a Friday night. So awesome.
Yeah, I'm glad to be here.
Yeah, for sure. All right, so let's see. Um, all right, Gina was born into domestic abuse and witnessed things no child should ever have to see. And like most children raised in domestic violence households, she too fell victim to abuse in two of her marriages. Gina spent the first 27 years of her life living in one form of domestic abuse or another, from physical, emotional, financial, psychological, and attempted sexual assault. Gina not only suffered physical abuse, but also emotional abuse that led to low self esteem, depression, and an attempted suicide. Through lots of hard work, determination, and the help from God above, Gina was able to break her cycle of domestic abuse at the age of 28 years old for good. Today, she is the founder and CEO of Speak Out, Get Out, Stay Out, where she helps victims and survivors of domestic abuse go from abuse to abundance in their lives. Gina helps empower, educate, and elevate not only victims of abuse, but helps women in general standing in their own power. Gina travels near and far, educating the public on domestic abuse prevention while telling her story. Gina is also an advocate, educator, speaker, author, and wife to Daniel, mother to one daughter and two bonus daughters, grandmother to five adorable grandkids. So you have quite an interesting
Yes.
story there.
Yeah, unfortunately, I do. Um,
Well, so tell us about your,
what
that was like a brief bio back for you, but I know, and we got to talk, and one of the things that's kind of cool is that meeting Gina, we have a similar group in common. So she posted something and I was like, oh my God, I need to have you on my Facebook Live interview. And so we got to talking and, it's interesting. We talked about having a calling and things like that, which we'll talk about throughout the interview. But I'd love to hear your story. Like, I mean, how that sounds like a lot of stuff for one person to have to deal with.
Yeah, it was. Like I said, I am a child of domestic abuse. My father was an alcoholic and also abusive to my mother. So we went through, all of that of witnessing that happening, um, and everything that goes with it. The low self-esteem, the schooling was like not important at all, because we would be in and out of shelters, and we never knew how long we were going to be there or when we were going to be pulled out of school to go there. So that wasn't something that was very important growing up. Also, you didn't want to have friends because you didn't want your friends to find out, your family's little dark secret. You couldn't have them at your house because you couldn't chance the fact of your dad coming home and blowing up. And also with the never knowing if you were going to be in your home or if you're going to be in a shelter, it was kind of hard to keep those friendships because you would be gone from school for, days, weeks, and even months. I also, unfortunately, went into two abusive marriages, and that's very common with girls who grow up in a domestic abuse situation.
Yeah.
My first marriage was more physical, and it wasn't until probably 4 years in that we were having a fight, and I was pinned up against the wall by my neck, and I just happened to glance over and see my daughter standing there,
Oh,
or our daughter, I guess it was. She was about 4 at the time, and the only way I can explain it is like somehow I teleported into her body and was looking out of her eyes, seeing my mom being pinned up against the wall.
mm-hmm.
So it was like we became one at that moment because I was that little girl,
Yep.
that was looking back at me. And that's when I knew that it had to be done because I didn't have a choice growing up, but I was an adult now.
Yeah.
And I had a choice as to if my daughter was going to live like that.
Mm-hmm.
And because it was a generational thing, I knew for me to break that so that she didn't have to live like that, that I would have to break that cycle. After her father and I broke or split up, I didn't have an education because schooling wasn't important. So I had
Mm-hmm.
to go back and I had to learn skills. I went to a local adult education program here in town and got computer skills and secretarial skills. And they just so happened to have a placement program for that um, class. So I got a job, and then I was able to get an apartment that was just her and I.
Mm-hmm.
And to have those three things checked off that list was so much of a relief
Mm-hmm.
because I was able to put a roof over my daughter's head, and my job made it so that I was able to, pay the bills and buy the food and all that stuff. So I know firsthand how important it is and how difficult it is that when you're in an abusive situation and you don't have those skills. I mean, you may not have ever worked if you were going through like a financial.
Mm-hmm.
So I know how important it is to make that action plan and the struggles that go along with that.
I have a question for you because that is something that I talk a lot about with people in our group is that, hey, I haven't been allowed to work, or I haven't worked, or I stopped working, for the family,
Right.
all those different things, which are real reasons that our people feel
Mm-hmm.
trapped in their relationships. So when you went to school, when you were going for your schooling, were you in a shelter at the time? Because that the big thing that a lot of people talk about is not only going to school and having the money to do that, but who's going to watch my child or my children as I do that. So how were you able to maneuver those things?
Right. No, I was not in a shelter. I knew that I had to, you know, get the education, get the job, get the car, and get the house in order for me to leave that relationship. Because
Mm-hmm.
sometimes, like it's safer to stay in a relationship temporarily while you're
Mm-hmm.
working towards your goals. So that's what I did. And
Okay.
thankfully, the program that I went to had a daycare down in the basement.
Excellent.
So I was able to take my daughter there when I went to school too.
Mm-hmm. Good. And those are things that are available, all over at least our country. I don't know what it's like in other countries, but they
Yes.
do have that available to people that are looking for that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Check into, like I said, the adult education programs in your
Mm-hmm.
area because of the fact that it is an adult education. They have already thought about the fact that they have to provide childcare so that the adult can get the education.
Mm-hmm. Excellent. That's a great tip because that's really helpful for a lot of people.
Oh yeah, yeah. And also, um, once I got the money for my car, and I laughed because that car was horrible. I paid $500 for it. It had holes in the floorboard. I probably
Mm-hmm.
could have like done a Flintstone kind of car, put my
Uh-huh.
feet through. But it was my car. It wasn't
Mm-hmm.
in his name. I made sure it wasn't in his name. So that was a big accomplishment for me to have, that little bit of freedom at the time that he couldn't take that from me.
Mm-hmm. And so it sounds like you were able, and this was the physical one. So then you did what a
Yeah.
lot of people do, and then you went into another relationship that was also unhealthy. So you left this physical one where you were worried because your daughter, you saw through your daughter's eyes what she was seeing, what you saw, and you saw that cycle was continuing. And then you left that
Hmm.
relationship, and it seems like it continued on just in a different form.
Absolutely. Yeah. When I met husband number two, he was, the typical Prince Charming, shower you with gifts, shower you with affection, says everything nice to you, cuddles with you, takes you places, buys you the stuff. And he lured me in, you know.
Mm-hmm.
And I had never had that before, coming from a domestic abuse background of a child
Mm-hmm.
and my first marriage. I'd never had anybody show me those kind of affections before.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so, things were going great as they always are in the beginning.
Mm-hmm.
And then it started to be just little nitpicky things. And this was an emotionally abusive relationship. So I didn't know emotional abuse. I knew physical. I mean, I knew what it was to, be slammed into the wall, or, you know, having to fight for my survival. I didn't know emotional. So it was the little stuff, just the nitpicky, that you can't sit on the couch unless I'm sitting on the couch. I would be talking to my mom or my sister, and he'd come in there. He's like, well, how long are you going to be on the phone? So then he put me on a 15-minute limit. I was an adult, and I had a 15-minute limit
Wow.
on phone calls.
Wow.
Yeah, yeah, it was pretty bad. Um, I couldn't be on the computer. That was his computer. Couldn't decorate the house because that was his house. It was a lot of little things, little name callings, little mind games. Um, and that wore on me more than what the physical abuse did.
Mm-hmm.
Because it was psychological. There's a lot of psychological games going on there. I
Mm-hmm.
knew that something wasn't right, but I just couldn't quite put my finger on what it was. And also, it makes you think, it's like, is it me? I mean, am I doing something wrong? Am I imagining this? Because even while he was nitpicking and breaking me down, he was still over here at the same time lifting me up to keep me off of kilter.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and after about, I don't know, a year and a half into it, my mom had passed away.
Mm-hmm.
So on top of the depression of it and the psychological stuff of it, then I had the depression of my mom passing away. And then I really hit rock bottom. And at this time, I was a whole whopping 97 pounds. I had lost so much weight from the depression and from the psychological part of it. And I unfortunately thought the only way out of that relationship was to take a bottle of pills. Um, the only thing I could say about that is the only reason why I'm here is because God didn't let me die.
Mm-hmm.
Because I honestly shouldn't be here. So after many years of recovering, of getting myself better emotionally and psychologically, and doing the inner work that I needed to do to heal,
Mm-hmm.
and to even figure out who I was. I mean, I didn't even know who Gina was besides the little girl in an abusive relationship, or the wife that was in an abusive relationship.
Yeah.
So I had to do all that work to figure out who I was. And then I heard, God calling me to do something with domestic abuse. And when you come from that situation, that's the last thing you want to
Yep.
do.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, and I'm like, yeah, no, I love you, God, but no, I can't do that.
Mm-hmm.
And he just kept on, poking, 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 and then finally, after some family things happened that had me really thinking, it's like, fine, if you want me to do something with domestic abuse, then you're going to have to guide me, because I don't know where my calling is in that.
Mm-hmm.
And so here I am today, helping domestic abuse victims and survivors break their cycle, and to help empower them and build them up, because it takes more than just breaking your cycle or leaving to actually stay out and to get better and become a
Mm-hmm.
thriver.
It's interesting because I have in the book that I have out, one of the writers in the book actually said, think about, and I thought this was so great. It reminds me of what you're saying right now, and your title. She said, "What it's like a fire. Once you're out, stay out. So get out, stay out." And that's something that I think a lot of
Yeah.
us get sucked into, is we get out, and then they come back and they're all apologetic and they say all the right things, and
Yeah.
we're used to the drama, so we're used to being called back in, and then we get called back in, and then the abuse
Mhm.
cycle just keeps going. And because there's so many wonderful, beautiful people that are codependent, that are in these toxic relationships, we want to be loving and trusting and hope that there is good in this person, and we see that good. It's a really great quality to
Yeah.
have. not necessarily in someone that you're dating, where like everyone else sees they're terrible, but I see the light in them. Like that's not how it should
Yeah.
be. It should, and it
Yeah.
sounds like, I mean,
Yeah, the
there's
rose-colored
people.
glasses, absolutely.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. Those rose-colored glasses. Everything is perfect, and you're pretending. And there's so many people that are
Yep.
saying right now, like your story is resonating for so many people because they've been through that cycle. They've been through that, domestic violence situation. And again, when you and I talked, it was kind of one of those things of even saying domestic violence or being aware what domestic violence is. Sometimes that's hard for people. Like let's point at what is actually physical violence, what's emotional violence, what's sexual. So all those things that we forget or don't, a lot of us never learned what is healthy. So
Hmm.
we don't even know, oh, that's abuse. Oh, I thought that was just love. I thought that's just how it was.
Right.
We don't really know any better.
Exactly. Exactly. Yeah, and you know that most people, when you say domestic violence, they think of the hitting.
Yeah.
That's what domestic violence is.
Mm-hmm.
And they don't realize that there is such a big umbrella of what
Yeah.
it really is. Um, and they're really not taught about, the financial abuse.
Yeah.
People's like, what do you mean financial abuse? Aren't you supposed to give your money over to your husband when you get your paycheck? You
Mm-hmm.
know, because they think that's for the family, and
Mm-hmm.
it is to a point. Um, Also, the emotional abuse. People think that having an argument or having a bad argument where they're calling you names or they're breaking you down or using the B word and every other word there is just that. It's just an argument. We had a
Yep.
disagreement. We had a spat.
Mm-hmm.
And that's not it. That's not what an argument is.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and because, we learned from our parents and from our grandparents and from society that if that is their norm and that's how your friends' relationships are and your parents' relationships are, and well, you don't think that's wrong.
Mm-hmm.
So it does take a lot of education so that people are aware of what is and what isn't abuse.
Yeah, what's considered healthy. And I think that that's so important to say because the psychological part is the part that makes you question yourself. And so you start to say,
Absolutely.
that person, they test out the waters. They call you a bitch that one time and they see how you react. And if you're like, hey, don't call me that, they're
Mm-hmm.
like, ooh, but she's still around. So now I'm going to call her a
Right.
whore. And then I'm going to call, and then it just keeps going. And like for me,
Yeah.
bitch, cunt, whore were the favorite three words that I heard all
Oh
the
yeah.
time. As soon as he was angry, those were the three that were the go-to. And now I couldn't
Mm-hmm.
imagine hearing those at all. Like, how dare you? Like, really? You're gonna call me a bitch? Like, that's like I
Right.
couldn't even imagine that. But those were my regular words. And when you haven't learned that those are not acceptable ever, as soon as someone says that, they've now
Mm-mm.
crossed the line. But if we haven't learned that, we don't know that that's not regular fighting. That's actually toxic, unhealthy, abusive behavior.
Absolutely. And the same goes for men because men are abused too.
Yep.
So if we're calling them a bastard or a asshole or whatever,
Yep.
well, we're doing the
Mm-hmm.
same thing to them. Um, so we have to be aware of what we're doing and what's being done to us so that we can consciously, you know, stop that, put up that stop sign so that we don't fall into that trap.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. And that's, and I think that's really important for people to understand. It's we are doing our own disservice to ourselves in the way that we are speaking to the significant other as well. And I'm not saying that anyone
Right.
deserves the abuse. So I don't want anyone to take it the wrong way. However, we still have to keep our side of the street clean. So there were parts of me that
Mm-hmm.
came out in that relationship that I could never imagine me being. And so I look back and I'm like,
Yeah.
whoa, how did I let myself get to that point in my life that I
Yeah.
felt the need to do whatever it was that I did. And when you're in that drama and you're in survival mode, it brings you to places that you
Hmm.
could never imagine being. But the thing is that you don't ever have to get there. Once you start seeing yourself change and you're acting out of character yourself, out of survival instincts and whatever reasons why, then it's time to leave. It doesn't even matter
Right.
whose fault it is. There's a lot of pointing and drama and all this other stuff that goes on. And some people say, well, but I wasn't perfect either. And they start going back and forth. The reality is, are you getting to a point that's not healthy for either one of you? And if that's the case, that it's time, if you've tried the therapy, on yourself and the other person is willing to try and you've done all
Hmm.
that, and then step away. And there's no reason to try to force it to keep bringing out the worst in each other.
Exactly. Not every relationship is meant to be.
Yes.
Um, you may see somebody who is cute or you like, or they make you laugh, or they're funny, and you think, okay, I'm going to try having this relationship with this person.
Mm-hmm.
But your personalities and the baggage that you are each bringing into that relationship doesn't always gel. And
Mm-hmm.
not just because you start dating or because you like that person, that is not a life sentence that you have to stay with that person forever.
Mm-hmm.
We all have people who come into our life for, they say for seasons and reasons.
Mm-hmm.
And then there's those forever people. So it's important that we realize that if you're trying to make a season person who's only supposed to be there for a little while, or
Mm-hmm.
that person who's supposed to teach you something into your forever person, it's going to be a very bad, toxic, unhealthy, and abusive relationship.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I was actually just having this conversation. My friend was visiting earlier today, and I was telling her that, I had a client that was, top of her class and everything, had never failed in anything in her life, and she was awful at relationships. And I have
Mm.
found that her, like myself, like so many other people that have not been used to failing, that for some reason we don't understand that ending a relationship that isn't healthy isn't failure. Staying in that relationship is failure, but not ending a relationship
Yeah.
that isn't healthy. And I think that for a lot of people that I talk to, they get sucked into that. Like, I'm a failure. I'm a failure. And I think you and I talked about this. Like, I got married to
Hmm.
this person. I'm a failure as a wife. I'm a failure, to society, that I'm supposed to be doing these things. And what have I done wrong? So we start questioning ourselves, all of these, ideas that we have in our head of what we're supposed to be, quote unquote, and then we end up failing ourselves
Yeah.
instead of saying, hey, if I let go, I can actually create what I want in my life.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. And I was guilty of that too, because I thought, well, if I would just try, you know, maybe it
Mm-hmm.
was me. I'll just go back and I'll try a little harder, or I'll forgive him this one time, and then you leave and
Mm-hmm.
then you come back for another reason. And when I was growing up, because it was a toxic, family, we always heard about, you're not good enough, or you're not going to do that, or you're going to fail, or I don't even know why you try. So that was one of the things with me as far as my first marriage. It's like I didn't want to fail. I didn't want to be a failure again. I didn't want to be a
Yeah.
failure in another thing in life. So I
Mm-hmm.
felt that I had to try again and try again and
Mm-hmm.
try again. Um, and I was one of those people that was jumping in and out of that relationship for many
Mm-hmm.
years, until it just dawned on me that I just can't do this anymore, because if I don't leave, it's going to get very, very bad. Because, like you said, when you're in that relationship and you're in an abusive relationship, it's fight or flight. And when you're stuck in a house with somebody and you can't flight, you, you just start doing whatever you have to do. You
Mm-hmm.
start saying stuff, you start throwing stuff, you start hitting back, you start kicking. I
Yep.
mean, whatever you have to do. So you become the person you hate.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
You run so fast from what's happening to you that you run right into that person that is doing it to you.
Mm-hmm. Yep. And that's a really good point. And so, to honor ourselves, it's important to know when to leave. And so I love
Absolutely.
all of that. And so I mean, you're now at a point where you know, you had like the happily ever after now. So you got out of this,
Yeah.
emotionally abusive relationship. And then what did you do to help figure out who you were and get yourself on the right path?
Well, basically, I did everything that, sorry, there's a bug in here. Whatever I thought was supposed to happen, I had to do the opposite because I was programmed
Uh,
wrong.
mm-hmm,
And that's hard for some people to understand.
mm-hmm,
So if I looked at somebody or, they were trying to reel me in or whatever, and it's like, okay, yeah, I like you. And then I'm like, wait, is this the same kind of person that I was married to?
mm-hmm,
So you have to question, okay, is just this a repeating of the same pattern? Is this healthy for me?
mm-hmm,
I had to, like I said, I had to do a lot of inner work. I had to get to a place that I liked me, that I loved me, and
mm-hmm,
that I put myself and my daughter before I put anybody else. I was always like headstrong growing up.
mm-hmm.
So, doing this, being stubborn and no, you're not coming into my life kind of thing, that was easy for me. Um,
Mm-hmm.
but once I let him in, it was hard for me to go, yeah, this ain't working, or
Yeah.
all these bells and whistles are going off, something ain't right.
Mm-hmm.
So I did the self work, I did the self help books, I went into counseling. I had a few counselors because maybe your first, second, or third counselor or therapist, they just don't get you or you don't gel. So you need to find one that is going to actually help you because there's one out there that's going to help you get through what you need to get through. It just
Mm-hmm.
may not be your first, second, or third one.
Yeah.
So that's important for people to know, to just keep looking for that person who does understand you so they can help you.
Mm-hmm.
And then I was alone. I didn't have a relationship. I wasn't married for 10 years after my second marriage because of the fact I didn't want some man telling me how to raise my child.
Mm-hmm.
Because, that was part of the other two marriages. I had even had her own dad tell me, well, you pay more attention to her than you do me. And I'm like,
Wow.
she's a toddler. So yes, I will always pay more attention to her than I will
Mm-hmm.
ever pay to you. That's my job as a mom.
Yeah.
So maybe that was why I stayed out because it's like, ain't no man gonna tell me what to do with my daughter. And
Good.
and I had to figure out who I was, do the things
Mm-hmm.
I like to do, have have that freedom that if I wanted to go to bed at 6 o'clock, I could go to bed. If I didn't want to do the dishes that night, they could sit in there till the
Mm-hmm.
next morning. I
Yep.
didn't have to worry about somebody trying to control me and tell me what I needed to do. I had to learn to have that freedom to figure out who I was and what I liked and who I wanted to be because I could be anybody now that I was out. So I
Mm-hmm.
had to figure out who that was.
And that's wonderful. And that's such an important part of the healing process. People go from one relationship to the other one.
Yes.
And it sounds like you, because I did the same
Yeah.
thing from like one long-term relationship to another long-term relationship. I had less than a
Mm-hmm.
year, and in there I was dating throughout. So there was never really a break from being with someone and really doing my own thing. As much as I had freedom, it wasn't the right freedom to do the work that I needed to do. And you say, it sounds like you did the same thing. You had one relationship, then the other
Mm-hmm.
one, two marriages back to back. You never got that. So having that real freedom and to taste it and see
Right.
what it's like to do everything on your own. Wasn't it nice? Like all of a sudden it's like that scary thing that everyone's so afraid of, like, ooh, I'm going to be alone. And then once you get to a place where you're alone, but it's not lonely, it starts to feel really good. It's not so terrible anymore.
Yeah. Yeah. And I always, when I give my speeches, I try to, I always touch on this because this is what always comes up. But I'm so alone. I feel so lonely. If I could just
Mm-hmm.
have somebody there to snuggle with.
Mm-hmm.
And I always give the analogy of a child with a pacifier because as you moms know that when you're trying to break your child of a pacifier, and your child being, the relationship, and you
Mm-hmm.
take that away, or the child, yeah, just hold on. Anyway, that you take away the pacifier,
Mm-hmm.
and your baby is going to cry for like 3 or 4 nights. I mean, throw a fit.
Mm-hmm.
And that is your body and your emotions and your ego throwing the fit about, well, I need that relationship. It wasn't so bad. You know, things weren't always that bad. He was nice sometimes, kind of thing. You
Mm-hmm.
start talking yourself back into that relationship.
Mm-hmm.
And like moms know that if you just wait a few days, that baby's going to be able to go right to sleep by himself without ever having that pacifier.
Mm-hmm.
Just like you will be able to stay out of that relationship, and your yearning for that person will lessen over time.
Mm-hmm. It's breaking
You
the
just have to
addiction.
give it that time.
It's the addiction. When I
Yeah.
quit smoking cigarettes, it was 3 days of hell. 4 days of hell of just like thinking about cigarettes, waking up about cigarettes, wanting a cigarette, all of those feelings that I had about cigarettes. And then once it was over, then there was a little bit of that, that psychological part of the physical part was done, but then there's a little bit of that psychological part that every once in a while I'd get stressed out and I would think about that cigarette. I feel like, it's the same thing with these relationship addictions, is that people are addicted to people. They're addicted to the relationship. They're addicted to the drama, and they don't realize it until they do start working to break it. And then all of a sudden they feel all these emotions that are really uncomfortable because they've never dealt with any of those emotions their whole life.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. Because when they, leave one relationship, they jump into another one. So they
Mm-hmm.
don't have to deal with the emotions and what actually happened in the previous relationship. So
Mm-hmm.
they just, go from one relationship to the next so that they don't have to deal
Mm-hmm.
with it.
And that's why it hurts so much when you finally do the work, because you've kind of pushed off all this feelings for all this time, and then all of a sudden 20 years worth, 30 years with 40, 50, whatever amount of years worth of emotions that you've suppressed is now coming out. And that's where the depression comes along. That's where, the sadness and not being able to
Right.
move and having so much trouble, because we don't know what it's like to really just worry about ourselves. We're always worried about somebody else and their problems. We're
Mm-hmm.
deflecting our own stuff onto somebody else.
Right. And whether you realize it or not, when you go into one relationship without doing the work for the other relationship, you are going to, the hate that you felt for that person, you're going to, if that person hurt you, then you're going to go into the other relationship feeling that timidness and feeling,
Mm-hmm.
you know, so you're going to project from one relationship to the next. You're going to carry your baggage over if you don't
Mm-hmm.
take the time to unpack your suitcase.
And I love that. So now you get to have your cake and eat it too. You get to have your Prince Charming, and you get to have three beautiful children. So tell us about that whole. Tell us your romantic, how you met your husband story.
Well, during the time when I was, living by myself, raising my daughter, he actually lived 3 houses down from me. But I
Mm-hmm.
was that person that's like, don't talk to me, don't bother me, I won't be nosy. You don't be nosy in my life, This is
Mm-hmm.
about me over here, my area. So I honestly didn't even know that he was on the same street. Had no clue. And he had lived there longer than I had.
Uh-huh.
Um, and then he started, like I would come home from work and he would see me. He'd come down there and he's like, I just want to let you know that your brake light's out. And I'm like, okay, thanks, kind of thing. And then I would come home and like my bag's leaves would be gone. He would stop by. Yeah, I got those for you and took them to the thing. It's like, okay, thanks. What do you want me to say?
Mm-hmm.
So this went on for probably 3 years. It's like me just totally blowing him off, ignoring him. He would give me his phone number and I would take it in the house and just throw it in the garbage because I just wasn't in that place.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and then he came driving through there, and he stopped, and I was out raking my leaves, and of course he stopped again. And he did the whole, I just want to let you know that I'm the chief of the neighborhood watch, and I know that you're a single woman, and I wanted to give you my phone number in case something happens. And I'm like, okay, I would call the cops, not you,
Yeah.
kind of thing. I said, but thanks. And just, I don't know, just something had changed me. I guess I was just at a place where his blue eyes got me that one day, you know. And then he asked me if I would like to go on a motorcycle ride with him.
Mm-hmm.
And I hadn't been on a motorcycle in a million years, and I thought, what the hey, you only live once.
Mm-hmm.
And from that day forward, we've been together. We've been together for 9 years now.
Aw, congratulations.
Thank
That's
you.
beautiful.
Yeah, and it's nice to be in a relationship that isn't abuse, you know? I mean, yeah, we have our problems, but it's not those problems.
Well, and you know, one of the things when you learn how to be single and you learn how to do everything for yourself and take care of your needs and things like that, there is that freedom that comes along with it. And in my what I've noticed, and you know, tell me what you feel for your perspective, because 9 years, we're coming up on our four-year anniversary the end of July, so you have a little bit more time
Okay.
under
Happy
your belt.
anniversary.
Thank you. But when you are find someone who doesn't try to take away from your life so you don't feel like you're losing freedom by actually being married to them, I think that's the piece that a lot of people don't realize. Like when you get married, you shouldn't be like, you know, like, oh, the ball and chain. That's such a wrong thing, because I married my best friend.
Right.
I want the person that I prefer to spend time with is my husband, because I thoroughly enjoy his company more than anybody else in the world. And you know, I love talking to him and staying up late and giggling and laughing and talking about the world. I love that kind of
Mm-hmm.
stuff. It's not taking away. I'm going to Utah tomorrow without my husband for a week. I couldn't have done that in previous relationships because it would have been
Yeah.
terrible for on so many different
Oh,
levels. I
yeah.
wouldn't have even made the plan because it would have been terrible. So, you know, to have that,
Yeah.
he knew coming in, well, Stephanie likes to travel and this is what she does and she's going to be off doing this, that. And he wants to support all of those things. When you're in a relationship, it should be helping to bring the best out of each other, not the worst out of each other.
Absolutely. And a relationship is about, respect, about
Mm-hmm.
trust.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and, one of your things was probably you didn't travel because then you would have had to listen to, well, you were out sleeping with this person or going to
Yep.
this bar
Mm-hmm.
or whatever it was.
Yep.
Uh,
Yep.
so
You nailed it.
you have to, yeah, I've been
Mm-hmm.
there, so I
Yep.
know how it is.
It's the same handbook.
So you
They're like,
have,
oh, this is the part where I tell you
it
you were
is.
sleeping around.
Yeah, exactly. And sadly, if you've been in an abusive relationship, we are all reading from the same handbook.
Mm-hmm.
It just may be a little different.
Mm-hmm.
And when you look back on it, you're like, oh, yeah, yeah, I can relate. Yep, girl, I'm right there with you.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So that's
Yeah,
why
that's
it's
what.
important that you go ahead.
Well, no. I was just going to say, and you know, is that when we spoke, we were talking about how we could almost like finish each other's sentences, where it was, you know, even though they were different experiences, it still came out to kind of the same thing, and that's what we notice even with
Yeah.
clients or whatever. It's the same patterns that we do, that the abuser does, that we as the victims do. It's the same kind of stuff. It's
Yeah.
it's like you can see exactly how the cycle goes.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. And it's hard being on this side of it, trying to help women and men to break their cycle,
Mm-hmm.
because where we're at now, we know, we see it.
Mm-hmm.
When you're in it, because we've been in it, you can't see anything past, you know, the TV screen or the front room, or so it's a different perspective on it,
Mm-hmm.
um, and it's hard for them to see it, even though you're trying to get them to see it.
Mm-hmm.
They're just not at that place yet because it is a journey, unfortunately.
Yeah.
You know, once you get into that relationship, it's a journey to get you through it,
Mm-hmm.
out of it, and past it.
Yeah. That's a good point. And you know, so wherever anyone is who's listening or watching this and saying, "Hey, you know, I've been in this for this many years or this many years or it's been so long or there's no chance of things getting any better for me." I've had clients of all ages. It doesn't matter where you're at. Everyone's on their own journey. And if you compare your journey to somebody else's, you're going to already be let down because that's not what life is about. It's about your own
Right.
journey and what your lessons are and where you need to be. So if you've spent all this time with someone, today's a great day to make a change. It doesn't have to be like,
Yeah.
you know, well, we've been married for this long. And actually, I think you and I talked about this with religion and getting a divorce. Wasn't that
Mm-hmm.
something that was like, you know, that added part? You know, I grew up going to church every Sunday, and just like Gina, you know, that was something. Religion was something important. So to say, well, I need to make this work because I'm married. So like there's all of these things that go along with it, and instead of looking at that, say, hey, I'm here now. Today is a good day to make a decision to change, and from here on out, I'm going to do everything in my power to make those changes, even though it's painful, because we can both
Oh yeah.
say it's not easy. It is, even with, you know,
Oh
we
no.
as coaches, with therapists, with your, you know, if you do coda, all of those things, get all the support you can possibly get because it's going to be hard. It's hard work.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's what I always tell people. It's hard work to for yourself to break all that.
Mm-hmm.
But then you add in there, now you're on your own for the first time. How do I make ends meet? How do I pay the bills? How do I feed my kids?
Mm-hmm.
You know, where do I get a job? How do I get a job? You know, and who's gonna trust me with my unique situation?
Mm-hmm.
You know, I'm coming from this place that I don't have these skills. I have this crazy soon to be ex-husband that's stalking me,
Mm-hmm.
or and I'm a single mom, so I if my kids get sick, then I have to take off of work. There's a lot to it,
Mm-hmm.
but at the same time, it is all hurdles that can 100% be cleared.
Yes. Yep.
And there are so many resources out there today that helps you get to there.
Mm-hmm. And that's what's so great that I, you know, I love too, that what you were saying is that pull to help those in need. And I think that's what you and I,
Hmm.
you know, we got that call, and it was one of those things, because I felt it too. As soon as I left, I was like, I need to help other people, because I felt so alone and felt like it just wasn't possible to get out. But I didn't know what to do, and I kind of
Hmm.
didn't want to, because I didn't want to share my story. I was embarrassed. What if my story isn't as bad as
Yep.
somebody else's, and they're gonna, you know, think badly about me? And what does this say about who I am as a person? Because I've always been a high achiever and I've done all these things in my life. And then here I was,
Hmm.
had this dirty secret that I didn't, even my best friend didn't know how bad it was. So there was
Yep.
that piece that was so scared to share it. But I kept having this, you know, I would say the pull of my chest. It was like this feeling of, I need to say this because I need other people to
Hmm.
know that they're not alone. And the more that you and we share our story, and the more people that come around and say, hey, wow, thank you for that, because here's what's going on for me and I don't really know what to do, and I felt like nobody else would understand. It's sad to see how common it really is.
Yeah. Yeah. And when you're going through it, you think you're the only person in the world that's living like this. And
Mm-hmm.
there is so much, there's shame around it.
Yep.
There's, feeling like a failure that you felt in your marriage or you felt in your
Mm-hmm.
relationship.
Mm-hmm.
Um, you don't want to tell your mom, you don't want to tell your friends, you just want it to just go away.
Mm-hmm.
But that's keeping it in the dark. And one thing that I know with domestic abuse, and I'm sure you know too, that if you don't bring it out in the light, and if you don't acknowledge that it's happening to you, then there is no way that you're going to be able to get past it. I
Yep.
mean, nobody wants to admit it's happening. Nobody wants it to happen, but it happens.
Mm-hmm.
And you have to go, okay, this is happening. I think this is what's going on, and you have to reach out. Even if your partner tells you, if you tell anybody, I will kill you.
Mm-hmm.
If you reach out to somebody, I'm gonna kill your dog or whatever. Usually, people, men and women who abuse, they only abuse you because you're there. You're their easy target. And usually they're cowards
Mm-hmm.
out in society.
Yep.
So
Yep.
that's something that you have to remember. Because they don't go up to their boss and blast him in the face because their boss made him mad.
Mm-hmm.
They come home
Because
and they
they
take it
know.
out on you because you're there. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And they like to try to turn around and say, well, I couldn't help it because, and then fill in the blank of why. But exactly like you said, they're
Right.
not speaking that way to their boss, or they would have gotten fired, or they're not
Yeah.
speaking that way to other
Exactly.
people out in society, or they'd get arrested. So they know what they're doing is wrong, and that's why they're doing it so, discreetly to make you look like you're
Yeah.
bad. And that's where
Yeah.
the crazy feelings start happening in your own head. You're like, oh, maybe it is me.
Mm-hmm.
Look at them being nice to everybody else and they're being awful to me. It's got to be me. And then you start questioning everything about yourself and what you do, and then you don't know who you are anymore.
Yeah. And it makes it hard for when you do reach out to people, when your partner is always that happy guy that's always laughing and everybody's friend,
Mm-hmm.
and when you try to tell somebody, hey, this is how he really is, they don't believe you. They're like, no, not him.
Yeah.
And you're
What are
like,
you doing?
yeah,
What are you
him.
doing to make him mad like that?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, you must have done something.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, you must have done something to make him give you a black eye,
Yeah.
throw you into a wall.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I think that
And
Well, I was going to say, I think that
we have,
you have shared so much great knowledge with everyone. Is there anything, if you could, if you had your 2 cents to leave everyone with and just say, hey, if this is one thing that I really want you to know about being in a domestic violence situation, about leaving, whatever it is, what would be like the huge thing that you want to leave people with?
it would have to be, no matter what they tell you, no matter how they try to tear you down and tell you that it's your fault or they try to make you feel, it is about them
Mm-hmm.
trying to control you.
Mm-hmm.
It isn't anything you said. It isn't anything you did. It isn't you put too much pepper on the food
Mm-hmm.
or, you know, any of it. That it's not you. It is 100% them.
Mm-hmm.
And you can get out and stay out. It takes work. You're going to cry,
Mm-hmm.
but you can. I am one, well, you too. We are living proof
Mm-hmm.
that you can get out of that relationship and not only be survivors, but you can be thrivers
Mm-hmm.
in this life.
Mm.
And real love and true love really does exist.
I love that. That's so true. And someone said knowledge
Yeah.
is power. Knowing all of this and knowing that we aren't alone can help empower, empowering others to realize they are
Yeah.
not by themselves. So I want to be
Right.
able to
And
take
that's part of my
questions.
calling.
Exactly. So how could people follow you on your journey of doing all these great things for others?
I have a website called speakoutgetoutstayout.com, and that's all one word.
Mm-hmm.
Um, on there are the links to my Facebook, my Instagram, and my YouTube. I do videos every week.
Mm-hmm.
I post content every week. I have recently launched my ebook that's called When Happily Ever After Doesn't Happen.
Mm-hmm.
And what that book does is just what we're talking about. It walks you through what you need versus what you want right now,
Mm-hmm.
and how the steps to get there so that you can get out. And then once you're out, what are some of the hurdles you're going to come across? Um, because, they are the same with every person that's
Mm-hmm.
trying to get out, the financial and all that stuff. So it gives you tips of how to handle those things when they come up. And then it helps you to stay out, financial, doing the inner work. It kind of walks you through all of that so that you can become a thriver.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and so those are how you can get a hold of me.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for coming on. We're not ending yet. I would like to take questions because
Okay.
there's been a lot of
Sure.
interaction. So I'm kind of, I've been listening to you and watching what people have been posting also. But since I do take the video and put it into all these things, I didn't want to have too much interruption. So I want to go back and just, anyone who's got
Okay.
questions right now, start typing away, ask those questions. Either one of us, we're both here for you. So if there's anything, I find that people are
Right.
afraid to ask a question, but 3 people are thinking it. So ask that question, whatever that is, and we are here for you. So Kalia says, how can we break the pattern
Yeah.
of gravitating towards abusive men? I'm single and I want to heal so I don't ever choose an abuser again. Go for it. Gina, you can start. You can start this one.
Okay. All right. First, you have to do the inner work. You
Yep.
have to look at who you are. You have to look at your values. You have to look at your morals. You have to make your list of what I call deal breakers. What
Mm-hmm.
are the things you will never, ever deal with again? And
Mm-hmm.
when you make that list, you have to be prepared that if somebody comes and they start crossing those lines, that you pack your bags and you kick rocks.
Mm-hmm.
No matter what. I'm not going to discuss it. This is what I will never put up with again. You
Mm-hmm.
also have to make sure that you have good boundaries, because everybody is going to want to borrow your money, to borrow your car, to have you babysit for free. They're always going to want to do something. Your man's going to come up and say, "Hey, can I borrow $20?"
Mm-hmm.
Well, borrow means pay you back. But when it's like, "No, I want you to give me that money." So you have to set up those boundaries. And when people start testing that fence, you're going
Yep.
to have to, smack their hand and say, "No, you can't
Mm-hmm.
do that."
Mm-hmm.
And sure enough, the people that get mad because you set those boundaries
Mm-hmm.
are the exact people you need those boundaries for.
Yep. Yeah, and that's what the self-work is so important, because you have to, it's so
Absolutely.
important to know ahead of time what's okay. And that's why a
Yeah.
lot of us, we never knew those. We didn't know what was okay because we kind of fell into a relationship. And and I've taught high school. So this is starting, in our relationships starting in middle school and high school, that we just kind of are
Yeah.
allowing people
Absolutely.
these unhealthy ways into our lives and accepting unhealthy behavior because we feel like we need someone, and we never learn healthy
Mm-hmm.
patterns. So we don't know. I didn't know what a boundary was till I was 34. Like I could tell someone
Yeah.
what my needs are. Like what does that even mean? So really getting to know yourself is so important in the process. Before you get to know anybody else, you'd better know you. You'd better know what's okay. And exactly what you said, be ready to get out when those lines have been crossed. And I think a lot of us, that's what
Yeah.
we do. We say, oh, well, he didn't mean it. We are too understanding. We're empathetic. Well,
Yeah.
I make mistakes. They make mistakes. But if you already know what your values are and you feel strongly about those values, then if someone cheats on you, you're going to leave no matter what. If someone calls you a bitch, you're going to
Yeah.
leave no matter
Yeah.
what. If
Yeah.
someone is, and if someone drives crazy while you're in the
Mm-hmm.
car, you're going to leave that. So, there's certain things where you're like, I am done because I love myself too much to put up with something like that. So that's
Yeah.
wonderful.
Yeah. And when my husband and I first started dating, he he had crossed one of those, because
Mm-hmm.
when you make that list of things, you have to make sure that you let your partner know, or your potential partner know, that you
Mm-hmm.
have this list. And here it is. These are non-negotiables. We're not going to discuss them. This is how it is. If you don't
Mm-hmm.
like it, well, then you can go ahead and leave now.
Mm-hmm.
So at the time, my husband had crossed one of those when we first started dating. And one of mine was the drinking, because I come from a background of my dad being an alcoholic.
Mm-hmm.
So that was one of my big things. I am not going to put up with drinking. Well, he went out with his friends and he rode his motorcycle home, no helmet,
Ooh. Ooh.
drunk as a skunk. And because that was one of my things, while he was passed out, I was packing, because it's like, I'm not going to put up with this.
Mm-hmm.
And he got the message. He got the message.
Mm-hmm.
And I told him, I says, I discussed this with you before it happened. I told you that this was on my list, and I showed him the list. And I says, I cannot let you do this and me stay.
Mm-hmm.
So you can pick drinking or me, but you
Mm-hmm.
can't have us both.
He made a good choice.
And you do. You have, yeah. Yeah, I'm glad he chose me.
Uh-huh. But the fact you followed through with it, even though you did finally
Yes.
let him back in, he needed to know
Yeah.
how strongly you felt about having your boundary broken. So following through on
Yeah.
saying, hey, I'm packing up, I'm out of here. And so this happens again.
Yeah.
And so you even have to be ready for that. In your mind, you put a boundary and you say,
Yeah.
okay, well, what does happen if they break a rule in the very beginning, but they have all these other things? And you have to say, okay, well, if they break it once, we're done. Or, you have to
Right.
to know ahead of time what is like, okay, this is maybe I give them one chance, but you don't give them 2, 3, 8,
Mm-hmm.
12, 85 chances. It's not like they keep trying.
Yeah.
And like you said, they'll poke and see where
Yeah.
the weak spots are. If they're unhealthy
Absolutely.
people, the healthy people
Yeah.
will hear your boundaries. They might make a mistake. You reinforce it, and then they're like, oh, okay, sorry, I know that she's serious, and I have to be more aware and more careful. The healthy people will respect that. The
Mm-hmm.
unhealthy people will keep going and
Yeah.
say, well, she let me go this time. What if I just did, something else? And they will try it from a different angle and see
Yeah.
what they can get away with.
Yeah. They'll try seeing if, check the back door and the
Yep.
window, and
Mm-hmm.
they're always trying to find ways back in.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Because for them, they want to succeed also. I feel like a lot of times, and this is whether it's a man or a woman, but I feel like there's very often where the person there's the victim and the abuser, the victim tends to be, it's almost like they're an object to the abuser. You're not really a person that's allowed to
Yeah.
have your own thoughts, feelings, needs, whatever. You're just
Oh no. Oh no.
something they have. So when you start setting your
Yeah.
boundaries, they're not happy with that, because they're going to, why should you tell me what to do? You're just this prize, and I don't want to lose my prize. So I'm going to play a little bit, but you're not really a human being to them. They don't understand what that is.
Yeah. Yeah. Because they're not being able to control the situation.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Exactly. And when you set your boundaries, they're going to fly off the handle.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Are there any other questions? Thank you, Kalia, for that question. That was really, really great. Let me just see if there's some other ones.
Oh, I wanted to add to that, that
Uh-huh.
if I hadn't done the inner work, if I hadn't taken that time to figure out who I was, I probably would not have been able to do that, because I would have went from victim mentality to victim mentality.
Yep. Mm-hmm. And that's so important. Someone said it's our reaction to our own abuse. We become them, and it's scary to put it like that. Yep. All right. So someone was agreeing. Kathy said
absolutely.
Kathy said she wished she heard this instead of "till death do us part, you stay married forever." Yep. I think we both had the same thing. It was, once you're married, you stay married. That's what I grew up with.
Yeah.
And that's what I experienced from my parents. They fought all the time. They didn't get along well. There was some not so great moments, and they stayed together, and we never saw the makeup. It was just like, let's just pretend this never happened and move on the next day. So that's kind of how I thought relationships were.
Yeah, and think of what it did to you as a child, and your psyche of what a relationship was.
Mm-hmm.
So it is continuing that generational unhealthiness.
Yep. And it becomes our job. It's kind of when we realize that there's something going wrong, we can decide to keep living in it, or we can decide to end the cycle. And there's going to be someone in the generations that are going to end the cycle.
Right.
Why not be you? Why make your child have to do it? As parents, we want to protect our children. So protecting our children means stopping this cycle so that they can already start from a healthier place. I'm sure I'm going to make mistakes because I'm a human being, but my kids are going to get a very different upbringing than what I got. And I know my parents did the best they could with what they had, but I'm deciding to change
Yeah, what they do.
things.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, and it has been, I don't know if you know about the new study that come out that they have actually found that living in an abusive relationship, like over and over again,
Mm-hmm.
is actually changing your child's DNA.
I believe that.
It's causing them to um, have medical problems that haven't been in your family before. It's
Mm-hmm.
causing them to have medical problems sooner, and it is shortening their lifespan, because it is altering their DNA.
Well, it's stress. If you put any body under
Yeah,
prolonged stress for any period of time, that's going to wear down your body. So if they're not able, and as
yeah,
children, we don't really have coping mechanisms. We don't really know how
no,
to deal with
not at all.
things. Yeah. And to just, and
No,
that's our life. Like, oh, mommy and daddy fight all the time, or mom and her girl and the boyfriend, or whatever. That's just, that always is what happens.
yeah,
Then you're scared to be home. I mean, how can you ever feel safe in your own home? Your home is supposed
yeah,
to be your sanctuary. That's your safe place.
yeah. You can't even go home and relax after, being at school or being at a friend's, because you're just always on that heightened, you know, mode.
Mm-hmm. Yep. That adrenaline is just always coursing through your veins.
Always.
Are there
Yes.
any other questions from anyone that's watching? It's been so great to see so many people come on and say hello. And we're going to go back and
Yeah.
comment on some of the other comments, because there's just been so much great stuff that's there. So we will definitely go back and re-comment back. But if there's no other questions, I'll give it another 10 seconds or so, because I know there's a little bit of a lag.
Yeah. And if, you don't want to ask the question in this forum, then, be sure to reach out to one of us, and
Yes.
we can get your question answered. We can
Mm-hmm.
get you the help you need. We can help you, whatever you need. We're
Mm-hmm.
here to help you survive.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, as coaches, we get to help you create your best life. I mean, and that is such an exciting ability to be able to share in that journey with you, because we both know what it was like. So, that feeling of alone, that feeling of the darkness that's there,
Mm-hmm.
we've been called to shine the light. And so that's there to help everyone. So, you have great resources here. You have great, on both sides, you have people that are knowledgeable, that are willing to help, that are able to help you. And, just to keep reminding yourself that there is the possibility to create the life that you want. Change is possible. So you don't have to feel trapped.
Oh,
And it's
yeah.
scary and it's difficult. There's a lot of stuff to put together, but it's there.
Mm-hmm.
It's the possibility is
Yeah,
there. Well, so I
absolutely.
don't see any other questions. Was there anything else you wanted to add before we say goodnight?
No, just keep doing the work. You can escape. You may not be able to escape right now, because most people can't just run at the drop of a hat, but
Mm-hmm.
keep doing the work. Make your list. What do I need to do to get out of this situation? And I always tell victims that they need to think like their abuser, but act like a survivor,
Mm-hmm.
because you know your abuser better than anybody else. You know what's going to trigger them, so that you have your plan ready when that happens. What are you going to do as a survivor?
Mm-hmm. Yep. Excellent. And, and someone's asking right now, they want to know what they're doing wrong. And I think that's a great question that our clients ask all the time. What did I do? I thought for a
Right.
while I was making them turn bad. It was my fault that they were behaving this way. That if I dated someone, I would somehow
Right.
ruin them and make them into these abusive people. There was definitely that negative thing. So, figuring
Mm-hmm.
out why we're attracting, and exactly, Gina said this before, you know, when we think, when we're working on healing, doing the opposite of what we actually want to do. So when your brain says, ooh, they're
Yeah.
attractive, run. Like, get away from that person.
Yeah. 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 And you're not doing anything wrong.
Yes.
You're just in a pattern of how you've always done things.
Mm-hmm.
And once you acknowledge that how you've always done things may not be the best way to do them,
Mm-hmm.
then you can start making that change. You
Mm-hmm.
have to acknowledge the problem and the situation before you can actually change it.
Mm-hmm.
So if
Yep.
you acknowledge that this is the problem. I keep a draw on these kind of guys, or whatever it is. Well, look at these kind of guys. What are the characteristics and the traits of
Mm-hmm.
that guy or that girl, so that for the next one, okay, I'm seeing all these same patterns again. So your red flag will go up and go, whoa, not going to happen.
Mm-hmm.
You need to back on up, because I know where this is going, and I deserve better than you.
Mm-hmm. Yep. And that's why, when we're looking to figure out what we need to tweak for ourselves, that's why hiring someone like Gina and myself is so important, because it's like,
Mm-hmm.
if someone is trying to lose weight, for example, let's not talk about relationships. Let's talk about the relationship with food, because that's a relationship too. And and you keep
Yeah.
doing the same patterns, and you're, hey, I'm 20 pounds overweight and I don't really know why. I eat healthy. But then you're working with a coach who's helping you, you're a nutritionist, dietitian, whomever, and you start writing down your food, and you start analyzing, you look at how much activity you're having, how much water, how much fiber, the micronutrients, you start looking at all these things, and you're like, oh, I could see why I'm 20 pounds overweight, because, I get stressed out and I reach for this, and I'm not eating enough vegetables. And, you start looking at those things, and that the person, you might
Right.
know or think, you're not sure, but to have someone else say, hey, just look here, this is what you're doing. And to have that third party perspective to help you just figure out in your head what is okay and what's not okay for you, because our
Mm-hmm.
our picker outer is broken. Our ability to judge things for ourselves, if we've had a family history of obesity and we're following what our family is eating, then we're going to have obesity issues as well. If we're following the same patterns of
Oh, yeah.
unhealthy toxic relationships, we're going to have the same unhealthy patterns of relationships. So we need an outside source to come in and help us to move us out of that same pattern.
Yeah, exactly. Because sometimes you need to have somebody with a different perspective.
Mm-hmm.
And you may know it. You may know what this person is telling you,
Mm-hmm.
but you didn't look at it from that way.
Mm-hmm.
And that's in every aspect of life. You might be going, okay, I can't figure this out. I know this is wrong, but I just can't grasp how to fix it.
Mm-hmm.
And then another person, you'll bring them in and they'll just point it out like real simple.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, you need to do this, this, and this. And
Mm-hmm.
sometimes your brain just doesn't work like that.
Yep.
So you need that brain that does to come in and say, this is how you fix it.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Excellent. So hopefully, Rubina, that answered your question. So anyone who watched this as a recording and was not able to watch this live, do not feel badly that you missed it live. Both of us will be going back and answering whatever questions, whether they were
Yeah.
during the live or after the live. So even if this is a few days from now or a week from now, don't worry. We will still go back and we will still answer whatever questions that you have. And, definitely follow Gina. She's doing great work. She's doing speaking events and has an ebook available. So, follow her page. We have all the information in the comments, and so in the description of the video. So make sure you follow her and show her some love and support it. And just remember, you are not alone. So there is the support. There is people out there that are living that life, and it's possible for you. It's not like love is not possible for someone like you. Healthy love was possible for us. It's possible for you too, and it starts with loving yourself.
Yeah.
So thank you so much for tuning in
Absolutely.
tonight. And we loved hanging out with you. This was our wild Friday night as well. So thank you so much for entertaining us and coming to hang out with us. And, never forget, you are way stronger than you realize. Have a great night.
Yeah. Thank you.